Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining the latest episode of Lowdown on Low Code. I'm one of your hosts today, Rob Koplowitz, and I'm here with my co-host today, Dave Marcus. How are you, Dave?
Hey, Rob, I'm good. I haven't actually hosted one of these for a little while. I've been so busy with other things, but it's really, really good to be back. And particularly on this one, my relationship with Camunda actually goes back a long, long, long time. So definitely appreciate being here and co-hosting with you today.
Dave co-hosting is like a Taylor Swift concert. It's like it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's a big deal. And today we have with us as well Daniel Meyer, and I as well have spent a lot of time with Camunda over the years. They've been very gracious with their time, and we're really excited about what Camunda is up to. Hey, Daniel, thanks for taking the time with us today.
Yeah, super excited to be here with you, Rob and Dave. This is great.
Yeah, and we're really excited to have you. For those of you who want to take a look at some of our previous episodes, probably about a year ago, we had another fellow from Camunda on, Jacob Frond. So, all in all, we're going to get a really nice perspective on Camunda. If you just want to catch up on past episodes of Lowdown on Low Code, it's brought to you by analysis.tech. You can find all of the episodes on YouTube and analysis.tech and wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the like button. Please hit the share button, and get the word out to like-minded folks who are excited about process automation and low code. So, hey, Dave, you want to kick us off here?
Sure, absolutely. Hey, Daniel, it's great to have you on. We like to kind of start these podcasts off in somewhat a sort of lighthearted way. And so, take us back a little to kind of what brought you to this point in your career, what led up to all of this, what created your interest in technology and ultimately this sort of process automation and optimization space.
Sure, that's a great question. So I've been always interested in both figuring out how things work, but then also making things work. And this goes back to even when I was, a teenager. I think my first big passion was sound engineering, like figuring out, how do microphones work? How do I record things? Then I built a recording studio with my dad in the basement. And that was sort of my first bigger project where, we built something, we made something work. And then I wanted to become a sound engineer. And then I realized, well, I don't have the musical training to do that. So that didn't really work out. But then what I discovered about myself is that actually more than recording music, I was interested in the engineering part of that. And then that led me to computer science. And then I studied computer science. And actually, while still doing that, I met up with Jakob and Bernd, the two co-founders of Camunda, and we just hit it off right from the get-go. And then I joined their company, and the rest is history, so to say.
Awesome. Very cool. Rob?
I love these stories. So just for a little background for the audience, we now have sound engineering. We've had a welder on, somebody who came to this through welding. We have somebody who came in through stand-up comedy. We had somebody who taught computers to play chess. These stories of what sparks people's interest are just one of the best parts of the show. Hey, Daniel, question for you then. So we're all up to our eyeballs in AI and the hype, and we're all, getting immersed in it in our personal and work lives. We've got agents, we've got co-pilots, we've got a lot of things that are going to be relevant to this conversation. But where are you seeing, from your perspective, the real value emerging? Where can the audience look to get sort of immediately identifiable value out of these emerging technologies?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So from a Camunda perspective, ultimately the way we look at AI is from an automation lens. So how can we use AI to automate things? And when you look at the history of automation, right, we went through this whole process over the years, or this journey as a collective industry. From initially processes were manual, right? Even though people were using computers, everybody was individually using their own computer and then maybe communicating via email and things like that. And there were a ton of inefficiencies around that. And then everybody moved from, no automation to what we at Camunda call task automation. So basically automating workflows. So still from a lens of what an individual is doing, but now automating that. And then that added a lot of value, right? Because instead of me now going into a system and then doing something, I can automate that. RPA is a perfect example of that. That's basically where that was coming from. But it also led to problems, because if I only have that local task automation view, then I'm missing the picture of the end-to-end process. And that is always what we were looking at from a Camunda perspective. How do I look at the end-to-end process, connecting all the systems, connecting all the people, everybody that needs to be involved in that process, and then orchestrating across that end-to-end. And then that drives a lot of value. So now with AI, we're going through that same journey again in many ways, right? The first thing we saw were almost like AI assistants. So I have manual work that I'm doing, but I'm using an AI assistant to make me more productive. So that's really interesting. Now we're seeing AI task agents. So it's almost like a new wave of RPA on that task level. And what we find really interesting from Camunda perspective is, how do I use AI in an end-to-end process, right? How can AI be a step in that process? That's really interesting. But then also, how can AI actually guide a process? So decide what should happen next in an end-to-end process. And we believe that if AI is transformational, and I think it's clear that it will be, then it has to be on that end-to-end process level. So AI, delegating more and more autonomy to AI to handle cases, to figure out how to handle customer complaints, to figure out how to reconcile trades, how to handle claims in an insurance company. So all of that, gradually we will delegate more and more autonomy to AI. And that's why we have to bring it to that end-to-end process level. That's how we're looking at it.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. Dave.
So, Daniel, I guess with that in mind, how should we be thinking about this idea of measuring real business benefits delivered by this capability today? We see so many people that are focused on, I'm improving efficiency. I'm giving someone an hour more in a month or whatever that might be. But ultimately, at the end of the day, how do you think about differentiating what you are doing based upon sort of real value to the business?
Yeah. Productivity gains is one big thing, of course, and that's the obvious thing we're immediately jumping to, right? How can I drive productivity gains, efficiency gains thanks to AI? And I think that's going to be a big thing over the next probably 2, 3, maybe 4 years. People will be primarily focused on that. I think the end game will be one step further when you look at, well, how can I actually use AI to fundamentally transform experiences, right? How can we use AI to personalize customer experience? How can we use AI to, tailor the service products and services we're offering a customer to their individual needs and their individual interests? And those organizations that will figure out that personalization on top of the productivity gains will be the ones that own the future in the next decade, in my opinion.
So focusing more on outcomes than just efficiencies.
That's right. We shouldn't forget the efficiencies. Those are crucial because resources are not getting more plentiful, right? And we need to do more with less. That belabored statement is still true. So we shouldn't forget about that. But then it's not the end game, in my opinion. The end game is really, how do we personalize and transform customer experiences, products, and services?
Awesome. Rob?
Yeah, I love that answer, Daniel. And it does lead into the next question. But, one of the things I think that's worth noting to the audience, is you guys are a process company, right? That's what you do. And it's always interesting to establish the value of new technologies, particularly when they execute within the context of a process, because we're actually pretty good at measuring how long processes take. We're actually pretty good at measuring what the outcomes are, the desirable outcomes. Do they need to be changed? Do they need to be adjusted? So, that was kind of the first thing, when I started seeing these things emerge, I said, well, these things consumed in the context of a process are going to change the game. So let's get back to that a little bit. You guys, we might think, is it okay to call you the BPMN company? I mean, you're kind of, it used to be, it's kind of, BPMN kind of hangs around with your name quite often. It's, I think, in a complimentary way. But the thing about BPMN as a standard is a long time ago, people set off to solve a pretty difficult problem, which is to manage a long running process, to manage state within that process, to manage it across human states, technology states, heterogeneous technologies. You mentioned RPA, there's IDP, there's, dozens and dozens of different technologies that can be plugged into this. And in a sense, AI agents are just another technology. It's another payload out, another payload in. But you took us through some stuff. You took Dave and I and the team through some stuff that was actually a little more thoughtful than that in terms of how these things build their way into processes and ultimately, I would suppose, into the standard. Can you help our audience with that?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So basically, as you described, Rob, BPMN has been around for a while, and BPMN for us always had two main uses, right? One is it has, from a technical perspective, it has all the what we call workflow patterns that are needed to handle the complexity of real-world business processes, right? I can have things running in parallel. We have events that interrupt what's going on. All of those complex workflow patterns that are needed in real-world business processes. The other thing that we always found quite unique about BPMN is it can address that complexity, but then it can do it in a way where it brings business and IT together, right? So where a BPMN process is directly executable in a platform like Camunda, but then the business understands what that process is about. And that bridges a really important gap that when it comes to building common ground and understanding between business and IT. Now, what's interesting is when we think about agents and agentic AI, we need those two same things, right? We need a way to handle the complexity that exists in processes that should be orchestrated by an agent, but we also have a lot of concerns right now around, well, how do we know what an agent is doing? How we know the sequence of tasks that it's executing? And what we did is we looked at the BPMN standard and we said, well, actually, we have everything we need there. The only thing we need to add to what is there today is this pattern of dynamic execution where AI decides which step should happen next in the process. And that is something that can be done directly in BPMN. There's a symbol that is called the ad hoc subprocess. And that initially really was designed for human case management. So situations where a human would look into a case and then based on a set of available steps decide what should happen next. Well, now we have agents doing that, right? We can have an LLM decide what should happen next in the case, but that can be embedded in this overall BPMN framework. And now this gives us the full power of BPMN when it comes to deterministic execution. So all the BPMN workflow patterns, it gives us the business IT alignment that BPMN has to offer. So everybody understands what the process is about. And there's enough dynamic freedom within BPMN to allow the LLM to decide which step should happen next. And with this, it's the perfect combination.
So I think it's also worth noting that, there's a lot of people converging on this space. We've got sort of native companies that are building interesting agents and AI. And it's interesting that, we get back to the good old BPMN standard and the use of the term orchestration, which is always interesting. And these companies that are more task focused that are kind of now saying, well, we'll just build orchestration. We'll just build modeling. And just a quick note that, you and I and Dave have both been around this space for a long time. It's really hard to do. So, just worth noting that somebody that says,
yeah, that's true.
And then a miracle happened. Hey, folks, just a quick break. I'll let you know that Lowdown on Low Code is brought to you by Analysis.tech. Analysis.tech is focused on process automation and low code. And we got a lot of folks here to help you if you want to engage deeper. Dave and myself, obviously, are two of those folks. John Reimer, who coined the term low code, Francis Carden, who started the first RPA company, and sold the company. Andy Bartels, our chief economist, Rick Greenwald, who focuses on data. So a lot of areas where we'd love to talk to you and can help in this journey to get you more effective in low code and process automation. So back to you, Dave.
Awesome. So Daniel, it's sort of interesting hearing you talk about this sort of BPMN centricity, and in some ways the fact that it's becoming. There was a point in time at which it was sort of questionable as to whether this was a really valuable thing, and it's almost like it's becoming more interesting again and compelling for people as they look at sort of the broader process needs within companies. You guys have obviously made massive investments there. You have for an extended period of time. Over the last few years, you've really been focusing on sort of deep diving in orchestration, but you've also been doing this a lot with sort of orchestrating not just your own things, but third-party things from other companies. It's interesting that we're seeing you sort of make investments in areas like RPA and IDP and others. And if you could just talk a little bit about sort of where those investments are, what kind of other big bets you might be taking, and sort of what the rationale for that is.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I talked a little bit about that automation journey at the beginning, right? Going from manual work to task automation to end-to-end process orchestration. And in many ways, we at Camunda skipped that middle step, right? We went all the way to end-to-end process orchestration. We had some task automation capabilities in Camunda since the beginning. So for example, we had human in the loop pattern via the BPMN user task. We then added decision automation with DMN. But at some point, it became clear to me that, to us as a company, that we shouldn't only look at the process end to end, but also look at, well, what does the customer need in each step of that process to automate that task? And that's where we added then more task automation patterns. So we added a lightweight RPA implementation to Camunda that's based on Robot Framework, which is a mature open source framework out there. And that is just enabling customers, when they have a step in an end-to-end process and they need to connect to a legacy system that, say, has no API, they can then directly build that integration with an RPA step in Camunda. Now, if they have an existing RPA tool and maybe they have already built a bot that can do that, then they can orchestrate too. They can orchestrate that too from Camunda. We call that composability. That's really important to customers because they don't want to rebuild everything from scratch when they bring in a new tool. If they bring in an end-to-end process orchestration tool, they don't want to rebuild all their bots. But if there's a new bot they need to build, then they can now do it directly inside Camunda. So that's the pattern. And the same thing is true for intelligent document processing. We also added a native capability there that's based on top of LLM frameworks. LLMs and AI is getting really good at extracting data from documents now, also classifying documents. So we added that capability to the product as well. And so right now, when we think about our product and how do we need to enable agentic AI, then we're really thinking across, well, we need to integrate with everything. We need to be able to automate every step in a process, and we need very robust orchestration that can blend what we call deterministic workflow patterns, like we know them from BPMN, particularly for high volume straight through processing, where that will continue to be the governing approach over the next years, but can blend that with deterministic execution, what we discussed a moment ago, where really the LLM decides what happens next. And that's how we're thinking about the platform and also how we're investing into the platform. And that is really resonating with customers. Last week, we had our CamundaCon in Antwerp, 1,000 people in the room, many more people online. And everybody was like super excited about this because they hadn't seen this take on agentic yet. But then when we showed it, and also we showed it live on stage, right? And then when they saw the BPMN process, then select the right task to execute based on the AI, that was really exciting for people. And we got fantastic feedback based on that.
Yeah, we certainly got feedback from Francis Carden, who attended last week as well, and that was great. I before handing over to Rob, I did want to throw out one other thing as well. You guys have been long known for adopting open source and adding value to it and so on. Is that sort of an ongoing strategy for you?
Yeah, so Camunda started out as a pure play open source company, right? When we launched, we didn't really have a lot of non-open source features or commercial features. And we still believe in the openness of our platform. Today, we are not technically open source anymore in two ways. So Camunda is source available, meaning that most of our source code is still available on GitHub. Developers can look at it, they can change it, they can extend it, they can build on top of it. But the usage of that source code is not free anymore in all cases. So today, if you implement a commercial use case with Camunda, that usage is not free anymore. If you implement a non-commercial use case, could be something you just do yourself on your own as a developer. We have some folks automating their, doing home automation with Camunda as like a hobby project. So all of that is still free, or Camunda is also free for other non-commercial use cases. Could be academic teaching, could be, NGOs, non-profits, and so on and so forth. But core commercial use cases, a license is required. So there's no change in our view on open when it comes to ecosystem building, when it comes to the openness of the platform, availability of source code, but just on the can I use it for free for a commercial use case, that's where we have changed our approach over the years.
Got it. Rob, over to you.
So thanks, Daniel. I want to pull a few strings together that we've been hitting on during the course of this podcast. One is this string around orchestration. One is the description of what you built what you demonstrated at CamundaCon and the excitement of the audience there. So, thing one, Camunda has always been in the business of orchestrating things across multiple existing line of business systems, right? You're very good at that. And to the extent that an organization could build a process that spans multiple systems on something like Camunda, then they're doing less customization in the core system, which is a good thing. A lot of reasons to do that. The second is you're describing what you're showing at CamundaCon being a very different application world than what we've been used to. And then the third one I would just throw out there is in the time I've known Camunda, which is a while, you guys have gotten better at building more robust applications. You've gotten faster. You've lowered the bar in terms of who can build those applications. The barrier to entry to build something really sophisticated keeps coming down. Do these three factors in a number of years make us rethink investing in what used to be these legacy applications, these SaaS applications? Do we shift to a world where we're building bespoke applications that actually do exactly what we need them to do, and some of these existing line of business systems get pushed back into systems of record? Is that where we're going?
I think that's very much where we're going. So we have a saying at Camunda, and that is, processes are the algorithms of organizations, right?
I love that, by the way. I love that so much.
Yeah, our CEO Jakob came up with that.
So yeah, I know.
Basically, when you look at how does an organization work? How do we service customers? How do we work with suppliers? How do we work with partners, and so on and so forth? How do we empower employees to serve customers better? That is the business process. And if my business process is hard coded in a legacy system or even a modern system, but if it constrains me on how I can innovate on that business process, then I can't really differentiate against my competitors. Then I don't really have control over my business and I can't innovate. So it's important that I'm able to pull out my algorithm from those systems in which it is hard coded and then bring it to that orchestration layer where it can then innovate on that process. I can put in AI, I can put in other optimizations. So that is really important. So that's number one. Don't have your process hard coded in vendor systems or systems where you can't innovate on it. Number two, and I think that touches on what you said, Rob, is I think the definition of what is an application is changing a little bit with AI because front ends are changing, right? So we demoed a use case at CamundaCon, which is a bank support agent. So, the customer can send in an email, ask questions, and then the agent replies, and so on and so forth. And what's interesting there is there's no structured UI, right? There's no form that I fill in where I put in all my structured data about my loan or whatever I'm asking about, but it's more free text communication. because AI can actually process free text communication or unstructured, communication, unstructured documents, unstructured text. It can process speech, it can process video, it can process images, that multimodal thing, and it can then interpret the meaning or the semantics of that unstructured communication, and then it can interface that back into an agentic system. So we probably need less structured UIs with many different fields and input data, but we can have more unstructured, more multimodal, and that changes the nature of both customer facing but also employee facing applications. And I think it puts more emphasis on the process itself and on what happens next and how do we service these requests. So I think between those two, the very nature of applications and business applications is changing with AI and is changing with end-to-end process orchestration.
So what I might add, I love Jacob's, I love the processes of the algorithms of your business, and the only thing I might add on to that is those algorithms do not respect your organizational boundaries, and your siloed applications are almost always purchased to automate within an organizational boundary within a part of the organization. So it really is a very different world, and I think that there's going to be a little bit of chaos as we figure out what this next generation of business looks like. Dave, back over to you.
Hey, Daniel. So we're getting a handle right now on what the next couple of years look like with regards to vendor investments and innovation, customer adoption and so on. If you were to take a crystal ball and look, 5 to 10 years out, what does this look like? So, as an analogy, in the next few years, hopefully we'll see, autonomous driving vehicles. But is there the notion of the flying car? And in this world, what does that mean?
I love that. We actually had a customer ask us that question. They said, "Hey, we want to build a new payment platform for the next decade. At that point, we'll have flying cars. So, show us the art of the possible, right?" So yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because when you fast forward a little bit, then I think there's a number of trends, and we touched on some of those, but there's probably a bit more. One thing is this aspect of, thanks to AI, thanks to more and more automation, we can drive personalization of product and services. Today, we have many businesses that are fairly low margin, and then that leads to a high standardization of products and services. Think telco, right? Think online retail to some degree. All of that is very standardized today, and they have to do that because they're not able to assign a human to assembling my activating my SIM card. That has to be highly streamlined and highly standardized. If we fast forward a little bit, that's going to be more personalized. So that's one big trend. Another big trend that will happen is more autonomy on operations and a higher blend of human AI collaboration. So today, when you look at how do operations work in large organizations, either, again, highly streamlined, STP, straight through processing, highly structured processes, or it is still fairly manual, case management, humans, handling cases and working through them. This will change, and that will give you the operating system for that more, that more personalized customer experience that will get delivered. And here there will be a much greater autonomy delegated to processes, delegated to AI. And what will emerge over the next years is what some analysts and some people are referring to as the autonomous enterprise, where you're able to serve customers better, where you're able to empower employees more and more. But in order to build that, you need that intelligent operational layer where you have processes. Some are structured, some are more dynamic. You have decisions, again, some are deterministic, others are more AI enabled, and we'll be building that central nervous systems inside organizations that can deliver on that empowerment and autonomy. And that is really going to change the world. And this might be more impactful than what we've seen with, the internet in the past, or with then everything we refer to as digital. this might be much more impactful, right? So today I go to on my phone, I go to my online banking application, and then I say, hey, I want to wire money from one account to the other. I think this will change. I think this will be a notification that I'm getting where it says, hey, you might want to move money from one account to the other. Is that okay? We have determined that. Or today, if I hear something in the news about, trade policy is changing or something like that, and then I'm thinking about, how do I react to that in my investment portfolio? This will change in the future. So I might get a notification where I'm proactively presented options that I can follow. And you will see that across each industry where fundamentally customer experiences will change towards proactive, towards personalized, and the back-end operations, the operating system in organizations that make that possible will also fundamentally change. And it's a really interesting future that we're moving towards.
I love it. Hey, Daniel, a couple things. So folks, find more information about Camunda at camunda.com, obviously. Follow Daniel on LinkedIn. A lot of really good content there. I'm spacing on Bernd's book. What was the name of Bernd's book? Is so good.
Yeah, so Bernd is one of the two co-founders in Camunda, Bernd Rücker, and he wrote a new book that's called Enterprise Process Orchestration. I can highly recommend it. It takes this idea of process orchestration and then explains how do I scale this inside an organization to then eventually transform it.
It's just loaded with pragmatic advice about how you should go about executing this on a day-to-day basis within your organization. It's a fantastic read. And the forward is so good.
Who wrote it?
Follow us on analysis.tech, more from Camunda, find out more. I think, Camunda is very committed to this concept of orchestration. We at analysis.tech really fundamentally believe in this being an incredibly important thing for organizations to understand in terms of how to embrace the future, including artificial intelligence. Thank you again, Daniel, for joining us today.
This was great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Dave.
And thanks as always,
Thanks, Daniel. Great to have you on.
All righty. Take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode of Lowdown on Low Code.